Hello, I'm Bob Trebshaw. I'd like to talk to you today about Anglo-Saxon meeting places, especially ones in triangular-shaped pieces of land. Well, there's a slight problem as the word triangle wasn't used until several centuries later. But once we identify the word that probably was used, then it sheds considerably more light on these meeting places. And you see, they're not any old triangles of land. They're in the corners of crossroads of Roman roads. And because such crossroads are rarely perpendicular, they're in one of the two acute triangles, not the two obtuse triangles. Here's the meeting place of the Anglo-Saxon Hundred in North Leicestershire, and the Gartree Hundred in South Leicestershire. But to explain all this, I need to start at the beginning, or as near to the beginning as we can realistically get, which is the Iron Age. We know that before the Romans, then tribal meetings, which included sacred rites such as ritual sacrifices, took place in holy groves of trees. Tacitus, writing about 100 AD, gives us useful descriptions of such rituals in Gaul, in other words, what's now northern France and northern Germany. We also know that the Romans continued to use at least some of these Iron Age sacred groves. They called them nemita, or nemiton if there was only one. A number of nemita became place names, such as the Roman small town on the borders of Leicestershire and Nottinghamshire called Vernemetum, the great or especial sacred grove. Nemiton has even survived, albeit badly corrupted, in modern place names such as Broad Nymet in Devon. And then, around the 5th century, the Anglo-Saxons began to settle. They also used the sites which the Iron Age and Roman people had used for rites. Perhaps there was some physical evidence still standing, but maybe it was more of a sort of a mythic memory that these were the places you went to get closer to the deities. And the Anglo-Saxons called them Harrows. Well, that's how the word tends to have been corrupted in the centuries since. It was spelt more like Herja in old documents. However, I'll use the modern pronunciation Harrow in this video as that Gars in Old English is a voiced dorsal velar non-sibilant fricative and not used in modern English. Old English Harrow is closely linked to the old Scandinavian word Horja, which initially denoted a cairn of stones, but acquired the broader sense of an open-air sanctuary. At least a dozen Harrow Hills and Harrowdons, which is the Old English word for hill, can be discovered on maps of England. And these hills are often, or not always, of a distinctive beached whale shape, as the photograph of Harrow Hill in Warwickshire shows. They also tend to be fairly close to Roman roads. Historians and archaeologists once thought the word harrow denoted temples, but they now broadly agree that harrows were open-air ritual sites, usually about 40 hectares, which is approximately 100 acres. In an earlier video about ringed horizons, I used some examples of harrows which are surrounded by a ring of hills on the horizon. In essence, this delays the sunrise and sunset, producing a more dramatic effect. Two Anglo-Saxon ministry districts take the name from Gartree. One's the Gartree Hundred in Leicestershire, and the other's the Gartree Wapentake in Lincolnshire, specifically in the parts of Lindsey. The Leicestershire Gartree is on the Gartree Road, a Roman road running south-east from Leicester. The eponymous Gartree was in Shankton parish. Originally, this meeting place was called the Methelhoe, or Meeting Hill. This map in 1885 shows the Gartree Hundred moot site adjacent to this Roman Gartree Road, which runs from Leicester to Medbourne and onwards to Huntingdon. And there's also a prehistoric ridgeway running north-south from Melton Mowbray to Market Harborough, which creates the triangular arrangement of roads, and the third side is a local lane leading to Kibworth Harcourt, which is on the London to Leicester road, now known as the A6, and was the location chosen for a Norman castle, and the motto of which actually still survives. Note that the hamlet at the northern apex of this road arrangement has the unusual appellation of Three Gates, although that just might be a practical coincidence. For many years, place name experts have attempted to explain the name Gartree. They've suggested that it might be a damaged or goitered tree, goiter being cognate with the Gars, or the spear-shaped tree, perhaps something like a Lombardy poplar, because Gars means spear, that's its main sense, Maybe it was even the tree of the spears, somewhere where you rested your spears against. The association between spears and hundreds is actually very appropriate, as only freemen could attend a hundred, and only freemen could carry a spear. Indeed, the Anglo-Scandinavian name for a hundred is wapentake, the take or count of weapons. Quite possibly it was a count of weapons to check everybody eligible was present before the proceedings got underway. We can see the same notion persisting in the canton of Appenzell in Switzerland, where only men wearing a sword can vote at the annual town meeting. We have to bear in mind that this custom, of course, long predates the rights of women to vote. Another explanation of Gartree noted that it may have been an indirect way of referring to an ash tree, as we know from Old English poetry that ash was regularly used for the shafts of spears. Looking at not just the gar part, but the tree part, bear in mind that there are two Old English words written trio, one of which meant tree, and the other meant truth or oath. Now this makes 100 moot sites named after compounds of trio, such as Gartree, doubly meaningful, as 100 moots would have been the occasions where oaths were made. Or are we not seeing the spears for the trees? Could it be that Gartree indicates oath sworn on an especially sacrosanct spear, presumably the one owned by the tribal leader? Well, just maybe, but I've long thought that there was a better explanation, and when researching this script in November 2022, I was pleased to see that the English Place Name Society website now includes what had been obvious to me for some time. The simple statement, a Gartree is a landmark tree on a triangular piece of land. Here the origin is not with the Old English gar, but the Old Scandinavian Gartree. As I mentioned, there is no word in Old English which means triangle or even three-sided. Triangle enters the English language only in the late 14th century. So, gar, spear-shaped, would be an excellent metaphor for such three-sided sites. Bear in mind the use of delta to refer to triangles, based on the shape of the Greek letter, was originally just such a metaphorical reference, as the etymology of delta is from the Phoenician word daleth, which meant tent door. Now, such metaphorical descriptions are fairly common in Old English. For example, the word ham, meaning the back of the knee, and the origin of the name for a joint of preserved pork, was used to refer to land jutting out into a loop of a river. A good example is Evesham. Don't get too carried away with ham, as there's a homophone, ham, which meant something like homestead, and is much more commonly used in English settlement names. Once we look for the significance of meeting places in the acute angles of Roman crossroads, then many other examples appear. They may also include the word wio, meaning shrine, or ho, which certainly means a distinctively shaped hill, sometimes a triangular piece of land, and, as I've suggested in an earlier video, a pre-conversion boundary shrine. So we have Roho Wood, probably the boundary ho, sitting within a triangle formed by the Fossway and another principal route from Melton Mowbray to Nottingham. Wiley, in North Warwickshire, originally the Wheolee, or the shrine in a woodland clearing, sits in a similar triangle alongside Watling Street. The third and shortest side of this triangle is the Fossway, about 2 miles to the west. The Staffordshire Horde was found near Hammerwich at another triangular site adjacent to Watling Street. There's actually an abundance of triangular road arrangements with Watling Street, which is running east-west at this part of Staffordshire. As one of the more plausible suggestions for the Horde's deposition is a votive offering in thanks for a successful battle, this suggests the location was in some way sacred to a deity prior to the burying of the mangled goldwork. Some classical deities, such as Hecate, were worshipped at three-lane ends. British and North European folklore retains a sense of three-lane ends being liminal places. Old English Christian charms provide abundant evidence of threefold evocations to pre-conversion deities. Nigel Pennick collected this example from East Anglia. Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, nail the devil to this post. Thrice I smites with holy crock. With this mell I thrice do knock. One for God, one for wad, and one for lock. This is almost belt and braces. The threefold Christian invocation, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, plus the pre-conversion counterpart of God, wad, and lock. And yes, the word God was used before the conversion. It just happened to be the only Old English word for deities, which was not always plural, so it was the only one applicable for translating biblical monotheism. The Trinitarian doctrine within Christianity is an accommodation of such prior practices, although its origin is with 4th century Christian theologians responding to the Egyptian Trinitarian group of Osiris, Isis and Horus. This is not the video for explaining how the Roman Church was increasingly influenced by so-called pagan ideas as it spread its influence into northern Europe and then the British Isles, but let's just say the Trinitarianism closely matched the worldviews in pre-conversion Gaul and Britain. Let's get back to Gars, which may hide under other names. Jeremy Hart noted that the Thing, a Scandinavian word for wapentake meetings, which is commemorated in the name of Fingest in Buckinghamshire, met at a 3-sided plot, or gar. This may also explain the Gartree hill to the south of Melton Mowbray. This is on a once important routeway from North Leicestershire, coming south through Melton Mowbray to the impressive Iron Age hill fort near Borough-on-the-Hill. With a little bit of imagination, some of the field boundaries form a triangular shape. Now, I've made no attempt to track down all the Anglo-Saxon moot sites or things at the crossings of Roman roads, nor have I attempted to track down every instance of Gartree in minor place names. Indeed, one of the key reasons for making this video is to ask for help. So, if you know of any Gartrees or meeting places at Roman crossroads in your area, then please email me. My address is below.